Sometimes the deepest stories are not made of glory, victories, or resounding achievements, but of falls, and of how someone chooses to rise again, or to keep going even without being able to walk. The life of Mephibosheth is one of those stories. Born under the promise of a throne and carrying royal blood, he could have been remembered as a great ruler of Israel, but his path took another turn, marked by pain, oblivion, and an unexpected grace that rescued him. This is the story of a man who lost everything and yet found dignity and a place at the king's table. Mephibosheth was born in the palace, surrounded by luxury, soldiers, and hope. Son of Jonathan and grandson of King Saul, his name already carried a heavy destiny. Perhaps he was the heir who would restore his family's honor, or maybe just a pawn in the cruel game of power. But while he was still just a child crawling through the palace halls, the throne was already shaking. Outside, David, a young warrior full of courage, was winning the hearts of the people and troubling King Saul. The palace still smiled at the little prince, but war was already at the door. Then the fateful day came. The news struck the palace walls like thunder. Saul and Jonathan were dead in battle. In an instant, Mephibosheth lost his grandfather, his father, and all the security of his childhood. In a desperate attempt to save the boy's life, his nurse picked him up and fled, running as though fleeing her own shadow, until she stumbled. And that fall was not just physical, it was the fall of his destiny. On the cold and unforgiving ground, the boy's legs broke and never healed again. He, who had been born to sit on a throne, now could not even stand. The escape ended in a forgotten place called Lo-Debar, a name that said it all. No pasture, no hope, no voice. There, Mephibosheth grew up hidden, among dust and silence, like a plant sprouting from the cracks of the earth. No one called him a prince anymore. No one remembered he was the grandson of a king. He would watch others run through the fields while he only dragged himself to the window to catch a glimpse of the sunset. The physical pain became routine. But the pain of being forgotten was far worse, until one day, a different sound echoed in Lo-Debar. Horses, soldiers, dust, and a royal command. David, now king, remembered the promise he had made to Jonathan years before, to show kindness to his family, and he sent for Mephibosheth. Fear gripped the heart of the man who no longer expected anything from life. Did the king want revenge? Would he be punished for carrying Saul's blood? Even so, he went, and before David, he fell to the ground and said, "I am your servant." But what David had on his lips was not condemnation, it was remembrance. With a firm yet gentle voice, he said, "Do not be afraid. For the sake of Jonathan, your father, I will restore to you all the lands of Saul, your grandfather, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth could hardly believe what he was hearing. He, who saw himself as a dead dog, was now being treated as a son. David called Ziba, Saul's former servant, and ordered him to care for the lands. But the most precious thing Mephibosheth received was not land, it was a chair at the king's table. Every day, he sat at the royal table as part of the family. No one looked at his disability, only at who he was, and he learned again what it meant to belong. But his story was tested once more. When Absalom rebelled against David and the king fled Jerusalem, Mephibosheth tried to go with him, but Ziba betrayed him. Ziba went alone to the king, bringing supplies and a lie, that Mephibosheth stayed behind, hoping the throne would return to Saul's house. Weary and wounded by his own son's betrayal, David believed the lie and gave everything to Ziba. Mephibosheth stayed behind in Jerusalem, disfigured by sorrow. When David returned victorious, Mephibosheth appeared before him, pale, unkempt, dirty, not out of neglect, but out of mourning. "Why didn't you come with me?" asked the king. And there, in front of everyone, without fear of seeming weak, Mephibosheth told the truth. He said he had asked Ziba for help but was deceived, that even though his legs could not carry him, his heart had run with the king. Every word seemed to cleanse the air round them. There was no drama, only pain and truth. David's gaze faltered for a moment, perhaps guilt, perhaps regret, but he did not fully retract his earlier decision. He said, "You and Ziba shall divide the land." And Mephibosheth replied, with a faint smile and tears in his eyes, "Let him take it all." What matters is that you have returned in peace. And there, once more, he showed that true royalty does not live in possessions, but in character. After that, the Bible falls silent about Mephibosheth. We hear nothing more about him. No applause, no more battles, no grand finale. But perhaps that is where his greatness lies. Mephibosheth teaches us that true dignity does not depend on what we own or achieve, but on who we choose to be when no one is watching. He was forgotten, then remembered, betrayed, and finally restored. He never walked on his own, but he never stopped standing firm. When life stripped everything from him, he did not let it take away who he was. When given the chance for revenge, he chose peace. When accused, he answered with truth. When everything he had lost was offered back, he received it with humility. His story is a powerful reminder that it is not how fast we walk that matters, but the direction of our heart. Even with weak legs, Mephibosheth stood firm. Even when forgotten by men, he was remembered by the king. Even after falling, he was lifted by grace. And so he teaches us that the greatest victories are not in conquering thrones, but in remaining faithful, humble, and true to ourselves, even if that ending comes quietly, without applause, yet full of meaning. He was not a famous warrior. He did not lead armies. He left no known descendants. What he left was an example of someone who lost everything and yet did not lose himself. The fall marked him. His legs never obeyed him again, but he did not become a stone in the road. He kept going, not running, but enduring. He lived in a dry land, but he did not let his soul dry up. When the chance for revenge came, he chose peace. When life offered back what had been taken, he let it go. When he was accused, he answered with truth. And when he could have exalted himself, he chose humility. The most curious thing is that everything he received, honor, land, a place at the table, was not because he demanded it, but because someone remembered him. David remembered the promise he made to Jonathan. Grace came to him, even though he could not pursue it. That is what makes Mephibosheth's story so unique. He is the symbol of someone rescued not by merit but by covenant, by love that comes from another. And we, who stumble over our own desires, always trying to prove our worth, to be seen, to be recognized, often forget that our greatest value lies in who we choose to be when no one is watching. Mephibosheth reminds us that even when we are hurt, we can still live with dignity, that even when we fall, we can still be lifted up, that even when we are forgotten, we can still be remembered, because in the end, it doesn't matter whether we walk quickly or need to be carried. What matters